Hi, my name is Arvid Gerstmann, and I will talk about vendor builds. What are vendor builds? Does anybody know what vendor builds, or often also called vendorized toolchain or vendorization, actually is? Hands up. Nobody? One? Two? Two and a half? All right, perfect. Vendor builds, as I said, vendorized toolchain is an often employed technique to remove dependency on the local development environment by simply bundling literally everything you have to and you need to build your application into your repository. That has one single exception, that is usually your source control client, so you kind of need a way to get the source actually. Yeah, why, you might ask? Including all third-party code, the build system, the compiler, and everything for each supported operating system might increase the size of your repository quite drastically, but it has a bunch of benefits. Let's quickly go through them. The first and probably the biggest benefit is simplicity. To add a new developer to your team, it's not a long, tedious task anymore to tell them, like, download that Visual Studio version, 2015, the first update, not the second one. Get that library, install that Qt version, whatever. It's simple as download that version control system and clone the repository and call that executable in there, and you're good. That's everything you need. You gain repeatable builds by having everything inside your repository, rebuilding a year-old build or even a 10-year-old build after you've upgraded Visual Studio twice and changed libraries becomes as easy as checking out an old version in the source control and pressing build. No need to figure out what Windows SDK you were using or what Visual Studio version, even after like 10 years, as I said. Versioning becomes really, really simple. You can upgrade any library for any developer without going through all the hassles. You don't need to pin something with apt-get on your CI servers of some specific OpenSSL version. One engineer can upgrade all the tool chains and all the compilers and all the libraries for the whole company. You can do rollbacks without having any hassle. As I said, you can just go back an old version in an old time and build that without having to figure out what compiler you actually used, because it has been 10 years ago since you built that application, and you upgraded your Linux, you upgraded your Windows, you upgraded your compilers, and suddenly it doesn't work anymore. With that, the chances that it works are minimal. You decouple your development environment from your toolchain. How many of you use Visual Studio to actually build and develop their projects? Hands up. That's a lot of people. Often that's the usual thing to do, and you can still do that. You can still use Visual Studio, but you can also just bring your own tools. You can just keep using Vim or Emacs if you're insane, whatever. And you can have easy CI. You don't need to maintain a continuous integration environment, which is kind of tedious and an incredible large task. You just clone, build, you're good. You can modify third-party code without worrying about forking your repository in GitHub, using exactly that repository in all your applications. And since it's all in your source tree, you can just say, here are the changes as a patch file. We applied them to that. You can build without. If you want to upgrade the version, keep applying them. Keep care of that. Obviously, there's some cons. As I said before, your repository will probably blow up in sizes, since you will have probably Visual Studio in there, or like the CL compiler, your GCC, probably Clang. That's already quite a large of data. But as this technique is often employed in the game development space, you already have probably hundreds of gigabytes, if not terabytes, of graphical assets. So just having 10 gigabytes of some compiler is not that big. There's a solution to get Visual Studio, to separate Visual Studio from, to separate the compiler from Visual Studio itself, to bundle it into your repository. It is it's an easy way to show how it works, but it's not the best solution. And Andrew Pardo pointed that out in the repository in an issue, that you should use the NuGet packages. I just wanted to point that out. There's some restrictions on what version control you can actually use, since Git, as you might know, is not really that good at handling larger binaries. but usually not a problem if you're in an environment where you already have a big, large repository anyway. I use that with 2 different ones, and I would suggest to look into that. One is Perforce, probably known, and the other one is Plastic SCM, which is another version control system, which both interact with binaries and large files really easily. Just quickly compare it to something we all know, which is probably Packet Manager, like Conan. They are great, without any doubt. You should use them if you have an open source project and you want to easily deploy that to users, or if a library, put your library in a package manager. But if you're in an internal company and everything is internal, your whole application is internal, this will ever be built by your engineers, you don't need that. You don't need to rely on anything externally. If the internet goes down, if your network goes down, you can't build anymore because you might need to pull an update from the repository or from somewhere else, from GitHub. And with that, you don't have the problems anymore. Dependency repositories is something you sometimes is done as well. You can just put all your dependencies in one second repository and have the source code in the first one, so it is decoupled. But as you might notice, the decoupling creates a bunch of problems, and especially with the Git, you might even need to use a different source control, or you put your blobs on an AWS S3 or AWS S3 bucket to pull them with some script, and you have to version that to basically create a version control system on top of that. It's just don't do that. No. Yes, they are obviously not for everyone because it's a very specific use case, but I got asked about that quite often. And if you have a large code base with many dependencies and you see yourself kind of fighting with them sometimes, you might want to give that a try. And that's about it. Thank you very much. And